Hi everyone! So today I thought I would film a quick video about 5 things that I did not like about going to Barnard College. So overall, of course, I really loved my experience at Barnard. I wouldn't trade it for anything else, but I did think that this would be helpful to prospective students just to let you guys know some of the negatives about going to the school, because I do think it's important to know like the negatives and the positives about a school. So I just narrowed it down to 5 main things that I didn't quite love about Barnard. I grouped these 2 things together because they're both kind of 2 formal processes that you have to go through every year. So housing, you only go through it once a year, starting your sophomore year, and then class registration, you go through it every semester. So it's actually basically like 8 times in your college career at Barnard. What I didn't enjoy about class registration was Barnard students pick classes from the Columbia University class directory. Everyone at CC, C's, GS, and Barnard are all picking from the same list of classes. And you get a class registration time, which is the time that you can log on to My Barnard and register all the classes that you planned on your schedule. But given the fact that students from all 4 undergrad schools are, like I said, picking from the same list of classes, it can get really competitive. It was super stressful trying to get into classes because, of course, you can be waitlisted, but lots of classes have different policies about you have to go to the first class and get your name on the list. But if you're shopping 2 classes during the shopping period that are at the same time and you miss going to that first class and you don't meet the professor, then you're never going to get off the wait list. Or, you know, if you need a class for a major or a minor that you're working towards but it fills up, then you really have to kind of schmooze your way with the professor, like, hey, I need to get into this class. And it can just be so stressful. I remember shopping period just being the worst. This might be an issue specific to the Columbia community, because at other schools there's less of a complicated relationship. Like Columbia and Barnard is very unique, whereas if you go to Boston College or Princeton or whatever it is, then not as complicated. And so I always found class registration pretty stressful because there's a credit minimum you have to meet, but there's also a credit cap. So you have to plan out your courses to make sure that you fulfill all the gen eds, plus your major, plus your minor, all that kind of stuff. So that was just never a fun time for me. And as far as picking housing goes, that was also a super stressful process. Basically, you get a housing number with your group, and then based on how good or bad your number is, you pick housing, and everyone kind of wants the same good dorms. You have to be strategic about the size of your group. If there are more 6-person suites and say you only have 4 people in your group, people are going on Facebook saying, hey, are there any pairs, any 2 people who want to join our housing group, or can we combine to get a better number? And also, when you're picking housing, you're unsure, obviously, specifically what your suite will look like and what your room will look like, and a lot of the different suites within different Barnard dorms are configured differently. And so unless you actually go and knock on the door of the suite that you're considering and ask the people who are living there currently to look around, you might not even be fully sure what you're getting into. You can know the general layout, but really every suite is different. I remember my sophomore year, I lived in 110, and 2 of the people in my housing group picked their double. Online, it looked like a great room. It looked nice and big, spacious. And then we got there and their room was so small, and that completely was not reflected on the layout that was given to us when we were picking housing. And so that was really unfortunate because they ended up having a really small double, even though online it appeared bigger. So there's, you know, the stress of the actual housing process, getting your group together, having enough people, getting a good number, and then also you could very well wind up getting into your dorm and being like, this is not at all what it looked like. With housing, it literally just is a lottery, and if your group has bad luck, then you guys might have to split up. You might have to live with a random group. You might have to live in a dorm you really, really didn't want. So that was always stressful. And something to consider that I think would be a negative for some people is that say after freshman year, after living in the dorms, you want to find an apartment. So sophomore year, you find your own housing with a group of friends and you get an apartment. Then junior year, if you were like, oh, that was great, but I don't want to renew my lease, I just want to live in a Barnard dorm, you can't rejoin Barnard housing lottery. So once you decide to get an apartment when going to Barnard, you can never come back into the housing pool and opt to live in a Barnard dorm. So a lot of people just only end up living in apartments senior year because they don't want to risk it and remove themselves from the lottery too soon. Cost of living was a huge downside. Groceries were so expensive. Eating out was so expensive. Drinks were so expensive. Movie tickets were so expensive. Broadway tickets were so expensive. Clothing, like everything. Obviously, when you live in Manhattan, the price is going to be upped. And of course, sticking to a budget is always a great thing to do to kind of combat that, and you know, having a plan in place for how you're going to afford things. Like, it's obviously feasible, it's totally doable, but it is something to consider. On our My Barnard accounts, there's something where you can track your degree progress. It's called a degree audit, so you can look at all the classes you've taken that fulfill requirements for your degree, and you can just have it all in one place and see like, oh, I still have to take this class to make sure I have my major, or this class. But the part that was so frustrating about this program is that you can have all of the classes set up the way you want them. For me, I was a philosophy major, and say I wanted to count Intro to Philosophy as a philosophy elective that's required for my major. As soon as I register for another semester of classes and those classes go through, the degree audit system will automatically reconfigure all of your classes, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of different classes that are now counting for requirements. So now instead of having my Intro to Philosophy count towards my elective, it's been moved to counting towards a different requirement, and this is without my permission. So it's like you can organize your degree audit this perfect way, and then the system will just mix it around for you, and that might not sound like a big deal. You might just be like, oh, just move it back. But to move things back the way you wanted to do it, you need to fill out a form and bring it to the registrar on Barnard's campus, and they have to approve it and then change all of your major requirements. It's kind of a minor thing, but it just was a giant pet peeve of mine, because you can organize your classes perfectly, and then if the system wants to move things around, it just will, and then you have to fix it. So I studied abroad at Oxford for a year. I worked really hard and got good grades, and then I came back only to learn that those A's will not count towards my GPA. And because I did a year-long study abroad, my overall Barnard GPA that I will put on job applications, on my resume, all that kind of stuff, will only be reflective of my freshman, sophomore, and senior years. And now with Corona, it's only reflective of 5 semesters. They won't let you use any grades you got abroad towards your Barnard GPA, which I found really disappointing. I was honestly pretty upset by that, because my junior year would have boosted my GPA a ton. But I will say they gave me a lot of credits per my abroad course. I think I got 7 credits for each class abroad, which ended up being 42 credits. In comparison, at Barnard and Columbia, you get 3 to 4 credits per class. And so they were giving me almost double per class, which was great, but I was never at risk of not having enough credits to graduate. Like, what really would have helped me was having a bunch of A's towards my GPA, and they didn't let me do that. So if you go abroad, just know your grades won't count towards your GPA, which can be a really great thing if you're just trying to have like a fun semester. But if you do go abroad, say for a year even, you might want those grades to count, and they can't. I'm not sure if they'll count towards my major GPA. So you'll have 2 different GPAs when you graduate, your overall college career GPA and then your major GPA. So they might boost my philosophy major GPA, but they won't have an effect on my overall GPA. I did obviously get to count the courses I took abroad towards my major, Only bad thing about going abroad is just that your grades won't count towards your GPA. AP classes will not exempt you from any requirements. I took a bunch of AP classes my junior and senior year, and I got 4s and 5s on the test. Depending on your score, it translates to a certain number of credits. So I ended up getting 18 course credits right off the bat as a freshman, which is about 6 normal Barnard classes if every class is 3 credits. So that was really awesome because in terms of credits, I came in as a freshman with 6 classes under my belt, but it wasn't totally helpful because I couldn't place out of any required classes. So for example, we have to take a science lab in 2 science lectures, I think is the requirement. And so I got a 5 on AP Psych, but that 5 didn't help me place out of having to take Intro to Psych. I still had to take Intro to Psych, and I still had to take my Intro to Psych lab. So those were my 5 things that I didn't love about my experience at Barnard. As you can see, a lot of them are just kind of nitpicky details about the system Barnard uses, or, you know, credits and grades and stuff. The things I didn't like about Barnard were big foundational things, and I don't think these things should make you second guess going to Barnard. I just wanted to let people know, to be transparent about, you know, some of the downsides of going to Barnard. So it's just some things to consider. If I mentioned anything in this video that you want us to go into more detail about, let us know. Comment below questions or recommendations. DM us on Instagram. We will always answer. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later.